Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Monday evening to you all. I hope you guys are doing great out there tonight and had yourselves a wonderful day, and I hope everyone's been having a great start to their work week out there so far. Here to bring a big time update on the tropics. We're here to discuss what's likely going to be Hurricane Helene sometime over the next 24 to 48 hours, and this is now forecast to become Major Hurricane Helene, which would make it a Category 3 or higher. So this isn't Mitch saying it's going to be a major hurricane or thinking it's going to be a major hurricane. The National Hurricane Center, the experts are actually forecasting this now. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go over what's going on right now in the Caribbean. We'll go over the latest information from the National Hurricane Center because we do have a cone now that we can really break down for you folks. We'll go over all model guides. We'll talk about the global models like the GFS, the ICON. We'll even show you the Euro, even though almost in my opinion, I don't even think it's worth showing anymore because I think it's way off as far as strength. It's not doing a great job at all, in my personal opinion. And then we'll go over all hurricane model guidance. I'm going to tell you guys right at the dot, when you see these hurricane models, please do not look at them and tell everybody, that there's 100% going to be a Category 5 hurricane. But these hurricane models are quite concerning. Of course, we're going to get the evening hurricane models that come in over the next couple hours, but we do have the afternoon ones to show you folks. But I think they're worth showing just because it's crazy the agreement on all four of them that do show a higher end scenario, meaning a Category 4 or 5 hurricane. And I'm going to show you why we have reason to believe that this could potentially develop into one of those scenarios as we break down the upper wind pattern, the sea surface temperatures, and we'll talk a little bit about steering currents also. We're also going to give you the most information we have given you so far on impacts. So there'll be a timestamp up for that. There's timestamps up throughout the entire video. If you don't want to hear about one thing or the other, definitely just jump ahead, but there's a good chance you're going to get your questions answered in this video. Of course, I'm not going to be able to mention every single town name and city name. I'm probably going to butcher some names. I'm really going to start to really dive down and really focus on specific areas starting tomorrow. So we're going to be using a lot of terms like the Panhandle, the Bend, the West Coast of Florida, a lot of stuff like that for now. But as we shift into tomorrow, I'll start to mention some town names, city names, things like that a lot more, as we'll have a lot more data to feed you guys. So if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. And if anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, please put it in the comments below. And we are praying for you folks in Florida, which certainly looks like the highlighted state. But folks, I'm going to tell you right at the dot, this is going to bring widespread impacts well inland too, and we're going to talk about why in this video. So let's get rocking and rolling. So I know that was a long intro. I do apologize about that. Trying to work on shortening that, but just the way I kind of flow with it, guys. So this is our huge area we are watching. Right now, this is dubbed Potential Tropical Cyclone 9. I think I've told you guys I do not like the terminology by the National Hurricane Center with that, but it's basically a tropical storm on standby. This is likely going to become a tropical storm sometime over the next 12 hours into tomorrow morning, and it's well on its way. In fact, we're starting to get a little bit of a coupling here of the actual cyclonic spin kind of right on the edge of this convection. This convection right here, which anytime I say the word convection, I'm meaning shower and storm activity, is shown in the colored area right in here, over here. So this entire area, we're getting a big blow up of intense shower and storm activity. So you see the blacks, the reds, even some whites, and even some pinks in here. This indicates colder cloud tops, which tells us these updrafts are soaring up way up in the atmosphere. The higher up they get, the colder it gets, which is indicated by these colors here. Now, we got a big old hurricane over here that's really just blown forecast out the water. It's really just blew up here. It's about to become a major hurricane. It's Hurricane John. Trying to steal the show over here, but this is, we need to pray for our folks here on the west coast of Mexico too. I know we're not here to talk about Hurricane John, but this is definitely a high-end scenario that's developing, and a very worrisome situation developing in Mexico right now. A lot going on, guys. A lot going on. But this is the main story here. So this is what's going on right now. Still just a broad area of low pressure. I would say the center of the low is probably up under this convection right here. And we're going to watch this as this continues to drift into the northwest Caribbean, and then eventually into the Gulf of Mexico, where it will have an opportunity to rapidly intensify. And we'll explain why it will have that opportunity to do so in this video. So this is what's going on right now. The latest from the National Hurricane Center. We can finally look at my favorite site, which is Zoom Earth. It's basically combining the National Hurricane Center cone, the tropics, with Google Maps. I just absolutely love it. So, it mentions a bunch of city names and, states and and all that stuff for us. It's just a great thing to navigate. It's free to you guys to use too. Zoom Earth, clicking in your browser, you can go straight to this. This isn't not a paid site or anything like that. So PTC, potential tropical cyclone, 35 mile per hour system, 9. Okay. Sometime tonight, this will most likely become Tropical Storm Helene. That will be the name you hear a ton over the next several days. By the time we get into, say, 2 a.m. Wednesday, it's a 65 mile per hour tropical storm. By the time we get into Wednesday afternoon, 2 p.m., it's forecast to become a Category 1, 85 mile per hour hurricane. All right, we already got tropical storm warnings, hurricane watches up for the western tip of Cuba. We got it over here in the Yucatan Peninsula too, Cancun. You got tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches. We even got tropical storm watches up for areas of the Florida Keys. Nothing up for Florida yet. By the time we get into Thursday, 2 a.m., it's forecast to become a Category 2, 105 mile per hour hurricane. This is from the experts, folks. So this is from the National Hurricane Center. Not just, this isn't my generated forecast. This is the actual forecast now. By the time we get into 2 p.m. Thursday, it is now forecast to become a Category 3 major hurricane, 115 mile per hour storm. I actually expect this to tick up here in the coming days. I really do. The National Hurricane Center is always going to go a little bit conservative at first. And I would say this is pretty aggressive considering the fact that the system is not even a named storm right at this moment. Pretty wild. But right now, forecast to make landfall. I've had some bickering back and forth of what people consider the Big Bend, kind of the cutoff of the bend into the panhandle of Florida. But whatever you want to call this right here, whether you want to call this the northern Big Bend of Florida or the panhandle of Florida, this is where the center of the cone goes right through. And Tallahassee is right in the middle of this cone. Panama City, there it is. Hopefully you can see this well. Perry, which is an area that got slammed by Hurricane Idalia. Trust me, I drove right through it. The town got hit very, very hard, and you guys are in the cone. And then, of course, what's wild about this and what's concerning about this is still in the Gulf of Mexico Thursday, 2 p.m. It's saying by Friday, 2 p.m., this is all the way into the mountains of Tennessee. It's tough to drive that kind of distance in 24 hours in a car. Now, most people can do that pretty easily. But for a tropical system to move that much, that fast, that far, that fast, is pretty impressive. So what does that tell us? Well, that means this system is not going to have an opportunity to really weaken in kind of a very small area. So, this has an opportunity to remain a tropical storm well inland, even a hurricane into like Albany, Georgia, for example. Maybe all the way up to Macon. I think this will be a tropical storm by the time it gets around Macon. But one thing I'll note is I know like places like Charlotte and Columbia are not in the cone. But folks, I just want to tell you this right off the dot. This cone could shift into this area pretty easily. In fact, some model guidance coming in reflects the actual low going more so like this. And I'm telling you, on the east side of this system, in the north and east side, the system's going to be worse, and I really still think that's going to go right through this entire region. And I live in Columbia, South Carolina, by the way, so I am watching this. I think this could bring some big-time impacts pretty far inland, guys, because it's going to be racing so fast. If this was kind of going slow, like just like would only go from here to here in like 12 hours, then it's going to have an opportunity to hang out over the same areas for a long time, therefore weaken. So forecast to become just the remnants of a system up here by the time it gets up here, post-tropical cyclone, but it'll still be potential for a tropical storm right over Atlanta over by the time we get into like Friday. So pretty wild stuff. I think this is going to cancel a lot of school Thursday into Friday across the Southeast. I really do. But this is the latest cone. I know I probably spent a little bit too much time on that. You know how I get. I like to talk. But here's the classic look from the National Hurricane Center. S stands for tropical storm, H for hurricane, M for major. So here's just that classic look a lot of folks are more so used to seeing. I would watch for this to tick back east overnight. What's pretty crazy, guys, is this is literally forecast to split that gap between the Yucatan and Cuba. We really can't get this thing to get over the Yucatan or the Cuba area. It just doesn't look like it's going to do so. That might, tamper intensification a little bit. So let's go over the model guidance. I'm going to back this up because I was checking this out earlier, so there was a little bit of a teaser there for you. But the GFS, we're going to start all model guidance off by Wednesday evening. So we're going to show you the global models first, the GFS and the ICON, even the Euro, even though I'm just not big on the Euro. I think it just does not do a great job as far as intensification and in the tropics in general. But let's take a look at the GFS first. It initializes this Wednesday evening as a 986 millibar Category 1 hurricane, which is about what the National Hurricane Center is forecasting it to be. So it's not, it's not that far off, you would think here. But Thursday morning, this begins to at least moderately intensify into a 974 millibar hurricane Thursday morning. That would probably make it about a Category 2 hurricane. Okay, we start to get into Thursday early afternoon, 970, and then we take it into Thursday evening. This makes landfall into the Panhandle, into the Big Bend of Florida. Okay, kind of the eastern sections of the Panhandle into the northern Big Bend of Florida here. Makes a landfall as a 965 millibar hurricane. That would probably be a Category 2 or 3 hurricane. And bring widespread impacts. But check this out. Look at this huge wind shield rain shield well north of the actual low pressure here. This is a big shield of rain getting dispersed northward all the way into South Carolina, all the way into the southern Alps. And this is what I'm saying here. Okay, watch what the GFS does here. We get into Thursday evening, we get into the middle of the night, Thursday night, like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, Friday morning. The GFS has the center of this low still at a 972 millibar low. That would be a Category 1 hurricane deep, well inland into southeast Georgia in the middle of the night, Thursday night, bringing widespread impacts well into all the southern communities in Georgia. All the communities in southern Georgia is what I meant to say. But what I want you to note here is look how far east this low gets. It's still a 981 millibar low all the way to the Georgia-South Carolina border north of Augusta. And look at this huge blob of red and orange right here, right over the Midlands of South Carolina. I don't want to get too lost in the specifics here, but this would bring significant impacts well inland. Large storm, huge storm here, guys. So this is wild because remember the center of the cone goes like this. Okay, and that's not the best color to use, so let's use another color here. The center of the cone kind of goes up like this, right? But the GFS wants to take this more so like that. All right, that would bring way more impacts further east into the Carolinas and, of course, Georgia too. So pretty wild stuff, and you continue to move this forward here. This doesn't even move northwest. It moves due north, brings a lot of impacts into Charlotte, Triad in North Carolina, and then the system basically just self-destructs very quick as it hits a ridge, and basically the storm just like literally evaporates, just disappears. It's pretty wild stuff how fast it weakens after it gets into Virginia, and most model guidance shows that too. So you look at the ICON model. Now the ICON model is very concerning for more of the west coast of Florida, like Tampa Bay. Even it would bring a lot more impacts all the way down to like Fort Myers and things like that. But this is the latest ICON. This threw everybody for a loop this afternoon. 977 millibar low, Category 2 hurricane Thursday morning the 26th. We start to move this into Thursday early afternoon. Look how close this is off the coast of I know Tampa Bay is city. The Tampa is the city. I know the actual coastal regions is St. Petersburg, Clearwater, and all that stuff. But you get what I'm saying. Look how close it is to Tampa. This would be, if something like the ICON would happen, there's Tampa Bay right in here. This would sling a lot of water, push tons of water into Tampa Bay, and create a storm surge scenario that would be life-threatening. Okay, but eventually it does make landfall north of Tampa, kind of in the southern Big Bend area, west coast of Florida, cruises over the northern sections of Florida. This is well east, right at the cone, just like the GFS is. This would bring big-time impacts to Jacksonville, the entire coastal region of Georgia. This would obviously bring this cyclonic flow, push a lot of water up into the Georgia coastline, southern South Carolina coastline, the low country here, and then it just moves north and then brings an all-out, still intact tropical storm through southeast Georgia into southern South Carolina into the wee hours of the morning Friday, and we're waking up Friday morning to an all-out tropical storm still. If you're looking at the millibar here, you would think this is still a hurricane over the Carolinas. It's honestly very concerning how slow this weakens. You would think a tropical system would weaken a lot faster, but I think that this is getting enhanced off a jet streak, and it's just not allowing for this to really weaken. And that's why I'm concerned, obviously, for whoever this is going to make a direct landfall to initially, but I'm also concerned about people well inland too. And then, of course, it cruises through the Carolinas, and then it hits the shield in Virginia, the ridge, and just kind of dissipates. So for people wondering up in Virginia, like especially in the Mid-Atlantic, what kind of impacts it's going to bring to us, I don't think it's going to bring that much in the way of impacts. It's the Southeast, and I'm very concerned about. Now, the euro. I'm going to show you this because I don't want anybody getting mad that I'm not showing a better case scenario. But the euro is the best case scenario here. Takes this, as we're getting into Thursday morning, just a Category 1 hurricane, keeps it at about a Category 1 hurricane, and then makes landfall into the bend of Florida here sometime Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening. It's just like a 980-ish millibar low. Let's hope that happens. System does not look near as well put together, and it does bring a lot of impacts. It's wild because on this output, it looks more impressive inland than it does as making landfall. But even on the euro, folks, it brings a ton of impacts into Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, all the way into the Alps, the southern Alps of the mountains in Tennessee and North Carolina and North Georgia. Okay, so even the more conservative euro brings a lot of impacts well inland. Okay, now, this is when we look at the hurricane models, and let's see if we have the 18Z models in. We do not, so we're going to have to stick with the 12Z. I'm sure I have some comments down there that'll say, Mitch, the 18Z did this, that, and the other. Trust me, I see them, but I'm making this video before 7 p.m., and they have not ran yet. So the hurricane models could be off the rocks a little bit here, but there's a potential that they could be closer than the global models also. So we're going to initialize these all for Tuesday morning. So to me, this already seems off, unless we're going to have a decent amount of intensification overnight. It's going to initialize this as a 992 millibar low on the H-Wharf hurricane model tomorrow morning. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be that strong. Already, as we're getting into this time tomorrow night, it's a Category 1 or 2 hurricane before it even splits the gap between Cuba and the Yucatan. I don't know about that. Okay, we get into Wednesday morning, it already has this as a major 957 millibar hurricane. Huge hurricane. I think that it's going to take until the hurricane slips into the Gulf of Mexico before it has an opportunity to rapidly intensify. That's my personal opinion. I don't think it's going to do it in the Western Caribbean, but I could be wrong. But it goes on as we get into Wednesday evening and drops this to a 935 millibar Category 4 or 5 hurricane. Continues to maintain the strength of that, and then it doesn't intensify it much more than that. Makes landfall as about a Category 4 or 5 hurricane into the bend of Florida here. Okay, Panhandle over here, bend of Florida. This would bring devastating impacts to even Tallahassee, which is inland, and even into southern Georgia. And this continues just to bring big-time impacts into Georgia, South Carolina, but it takes more of that National Hurricane Center cone than anything. The HMON model. And one of the big things I want to see with the hurricane models as they come out this evening, I want to see if they tick east, like some of these global models. That's a big thing I want to see here. Now, Tuesday morning has the HMON initializing as a 994. I still think that's just too strong. It wants to deepen this as we get into Wednesday morning to a 964 millibar low, not quite as crazy strong as the H-Wharf model at this point, but has this as a high-end Category 2 hurricane. And then we get into Thursday morning. This is a 933, once again, just like the H-Wharf model, Category 4 or 5 hurricane, and it deepens this into a 918 millibar Category 5 hurricane and absolutely devastates the Big Bend coastal regions of Florida. Perry, once again, would get slammed with this, and this would just bring awful conditions overnight into North Florida into southern Georgia. And this definitely gets closer to South Carolina. Would definitely it would bring big-time impacts well inland, guys. So, the HAF-A model is the most aggressive one of them all, basically. And it wants to initialize this as already a Category 1 hurricane tomorrow. I just think this is off, but I will show it to you anyways. Gets this as to a 948 millibar Category 3 or 4 hurricane Wednesday morning. And wants to drop this all the way to a sub-900 millibar low hurricane Thursday morning. I just do not think that's going to happen even at all. I don't even think this is going to get into the 920s or 30s. I think there's a potential for it, and I'll explain why. But I don't want to sit here and eat my words and say it's not going to get to the 930s. But I just do not see this getting into like the 9 single digits, the 9 teens, or anything like that. But this would bring a devastating hurricane Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening into the bend of Florida. This is the hurricane models are some of the worst case scenarios. I'm hoping that they come in a little bit weaker on the 18Z. I would say, even the HFB model is just too much. Wednesday, mid-afternoon, 941 millibar hurricane deepens this into an 888 millibar Category 5 hurricane. This is not even really worth spending a lot of time on. That just seems outrageous for anything like that. But I think the main reason I'm showing this is two reasons. It's wild that all hurricane models agree here that this is going to become at least a powerful hurricane. It's also pretty wild that they're all making landfall around kind of the same area, whether it's more so what you would call the panhandle for you Floridians, or either the Big Bend or the Big Bend of Florida. It's really liking this area right here. I'm going to kind of draw on this a little bit. It's really liking this entire region right in here for some sort of landfall. I know that's still a very wide area, but they're all liking that area. So let's hope nothing like the hurricane models that are showing actually happens. Now, if we look at the GEFS ensemble guidance, there's still a little bit of a range, but folks, the medium range here for land, I'm not really looking at this as far as strength. It's more of location of where this is going to make landfall. Kind of the medium area is certainly right into here, into the panhandle or the bend of Florida. This is where it looks like kind of the average of all these low pressures go, right into this area or that area right into there. So that is kind of the ensemble, guys. Not going to stay very long on this. I will show you what the European ensemble guidance actually shows also. Okay, all right. I guess it's not going to come in. It's probably because this is just getting used a whole lot right now. Well, we can look at it real quick. Let's zoom into this area. This is the Euro ensemble. Sorry to kind of do this on the fly. I like to have everything prepared for you folks. But yeah, I mean, I think that the Euro ensemble is a really great thing to look at for location, not strength, location. It is really zooming in right here to the bend, where the bend connects to the panhandle of Florida. I know, and I'm trying not to get hung up on this, but I've had so many comments about it. I know some people just consider this part of Florida the panhandle, and that's probably what it is. But whether you consider this still areas of the panhandle or the bend of Florida, whatever you consider it, these are the areas I want to watch out for, especially this area. If you hear my kid yelling in the background, I have two little girls, and they have been fighting like cats this evening. So there's a little bit more of the personal feel I'll talk about with the channel. But let's talk about conditions that do support a hurricane, and not only a hurricane, but the potential for a rapidly intensifying hurricane. So these are sea surface temperatures, and I know they're in Celsius. It's probably confusing people, but remember 30, 31, 32 degrees Celsius is equivalent to temperatures in Fahrenheit in the mid to upper 80s. So temperatures in this entire area that this potential and future tropical system will move are lows right into here. This system is forecast to go right over these extremely warm waters of the Western Caribbean and areas of the Gulf of Mexico. Sea surface temperatures 30, 31, 32 degrees Celsius, mid to upper 80s in Fahrenheit. So you got rocket fuel. It's like bathtub waters in the Gulf of Mexico. You literally stick your feet in the Gulf of Mexico right now and you'll feel how warm it is. That is rocket fuel for these tropical systems. It's not good at all. We even got this like warm little tongue of just downright hot sea surface temperatures here in the Gulf of Mexico right in this area. So check that off the box as an ingredient that supports a rapidly intensifying hurricane, guys. But the thing that I'm really looking at, and I'm just showing you, don't focus too much on the millibar number that is shown here because we've already went over all the hurricane model guidance. But we're looking at the upper wind pattern now. So this is kind of the educational portion of the video, kind of the portion of the video that I'll kind of geek out with you guys, really explain why this does have that opportunity to rapidly intensify in the Gulf of Mexico. So we're going to start this off by Tuesday morning. Tomorrow morning, it's a 994 millibar low, which what we already know is the upper wind pattern is already supported for an intensifying tropical system. It's just, is the structure, improved yet to actually begin to moderately to rapidly intensify? And the answer to that is probably no. But what we know here is in the northern hemisphere, low pressure spins cyclonically. So, this system in the low to mid levels of the atmosphere is going to be spinning like this around this central low pressure. In the upper levels of the atmosphere, and what you're seeing here, this is 35, 40,000 feet up in the air, 200 millibars. Air is being dispersed out away from the system. So if you look at these lines right here with the arrowheads embedded into them, it's shooting out just like this. It's going like that, just like that right here. and like that here. Air is being pushed away from the system right here, just like that. Over here also. And even down here, air is being dispersed away from the system. So what does that mean? Well, rising air allows for consistent convection, shower and storm activity, and the firing of shower and storm activity. That's what we know about rising air. Sinking air does the opposite. So as air is rising through the middle portion of this system and around it, in the upper levels of the atmosphere, as you can tell with these million arrows I just drew on the screen, air is actually getting pushed away from the system. Whether it's actually getting pushed out away anticyclonically or just straight away from the system, regardless, it's getting pushed away. This is allowing for more air to rise around this system. That gets dispersed outward, and it's just a continuous cycle if it has an upper wind pattern on top of this tropical system. Not in the low to mid levels, but it's on top of this tropical system. 40,000 feet up in the air is on top of this convection that these tropical systems are generating. So basically air is being pushed out away from the system, allowing for more air to rise. What does rising air do? Fires convection, shower and storm activity. What does shower and storm activity do for these tropical systems? It creates a moist environment. Tropical systems love a moist environment, so what does that do? Well, that allows for this to improve its structure. As it improves its structure, you open up the window and the opportunity for RI, rapid intensification, or at least moderate intensification. So it's definitely a step-by-step process, and I think this system will go through that step-by-step process and eventually begin to rapidly intensify in the Gulf of Mexico because of this excellent upper wind pattern that this system will be working with. So we call it divergence aloft. Some people call it a ULAC, upper level anticyclone, especially if it's right over the system. It's just basically an excellent upper wind pattern that supports at least steadily intensification of this tropical system. So hope that makes sense as we continue to move forward here. This does nothing but increase. In fact, as we get right here, this is going to get a boost from a jet streak right here. So you see these bright, vibrant oranges and reds up here, yellows and greens. These are winds in the way up in the atmosphere, like the area of the atmosphere where the actual jet sits. Winds are going like 90, 100, 110 knots, very fast speed. So this air is basically accelerating out away from this system in this direction. I mean, at a very fast clip. Okay, I mean, right here, one thing that we were wondering with this system at one point was, is this system going to get affected by some westerly flow aloft? Well, this has been displaced so far to the east now, okay, and let's get this right. This has kind of trended so far east, and this upper level low right here is kind of doing something different now, that the flow is not really westerly anymore. The flow is going to kind of actually work in tandem with the actual direction of the storm that it's going, which is going to be moving north to northeast. Okay, so what does that do? That just allows for this system to continue to get a boost in the upper wind pattern and the upper levels of the atmosphere. So instead of this getting blasted by westerly shear, instead the air just goes like this and immediately accelerates northward. Okay, so this is just getting a huge jet boost, allowing for just a whole lot of air to be dispersed outward from this system. So what is that going to really do here? Well, that's going to allow for rapid intensification, most likely in the Gulf of Mexico. And it's also going to allow for a big rain shield, a surge of moisture to get well into the southeast, most likely well ahead of this system. So we're most likely going to have a lot of moisture because of this front moving in, and just this jet streak enhancement of the rising air that's going to be generated off basically all this disbursement of air. And we're going to have a lot of rain ahead of this system before the actual central portion of this system even moves inland. So I know I'm just kind of going over the same information. I do that sometimes. But what I'm trying to say here, guys, is that the upper wind pattern is going to be downright dangerous for rapid intensification. I mean, so much air being dispersed outward from the system. It's quite ridiculous. Low shear environment. Nothing's really bothering this system. And so it's going to have such an opportunity to strengthen in the eastern Gulf of Mexico that it's going to develop a very broad, moist cocoon area of air around the actual center of low pressure. So the green's obviously moist air in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, and then the brown is dry air. So you keep this moving, And we start to get into Wednesday evening. We start to get into Thursday. All right. One thing I'll notice here, one thing you'll notice here is that look at all the moist air getting thrown way up here. That is because you have so much air being pushed out away from this system. So that's why I think we're going to get a whole lot of moisture well north and northeast of this system ahead of time. But one thing you'll notice is dry air is trying to get sucked into the cyclonic flow of this system. But the system gets so strong, whether it's a 930, whether it's a 940, 950. I think either way, I think it gets strong enough and it creates such a moist environment that dry air isn't able to really penetrate the southern side of this system. And in fact, if we take just a closer look at this, all right, I'm going to do this on the fly here. This is the H-Wharf model. If we take a closer look at this right here, you'll see what I'm talking about. We'll back this up here. Huge moist environment. Now watch how the southern edge of the storm starts to get kind of muted here. You start to lose the green, and you start to see some splotches of brown down here. Dry air tries to get to this system at the last second, right before landfall, but it's not able to penetrate the cyclonic flow of the system, the actual spin around it, and dry air is not able to really get into the system. A little bit might could. You know, there's been some chatter about the possibility of this weakening right before landfall. I think that is a possibility. I just don't think it's going to get to it in time. I think it needs to get to it right here. You know, here's the west coast of Florida. That dry air needs to start getting into the system right here, and then it'll have an opportunity to weaken for several hours before making landfall, and I just don't think that's going to happen. I think this thing gets so strong, builds such a, I would say, a supporting wall around the system that it just cannot get penetrated in time by the dry air that tries to circulate in from the west and eventually get to the southern base of the storm. So as far as steering currents, guys, it's one of those things where it's pretty cut and dry now. This thing is going to move north, so we get this in motion here. What's going to happen here is this upper trough is going to dig down here. So we'll stop it here. This is for the middle of the night tomorrow night into Wednesday morning. So flow around this kind of ridge feature is going to kind of go like this. Flow around this trough, this area in blue, which is low pressure, by the way, is going to go just like that. This is a ridge in kind of the salmon orange color. Flow around that goes anticyclonically. Flow around low pressure goes cyclonically. And our system's going to show up down here. Okay, so we get this all back off your screen. We continue to get this in motion. And here it comes. Our system is splitting the gap. So what we got going on here now is the flow continues to go around this, just like that. Our tropical system, which is a hurricane at this point, stronger low pressure, always wants to gain latitude, so it wants to go north regardless of what's steering you and what's not. But there's nothing really blocking this from heading north, okay, or like this. Nothing at all. This ridge feature right here, the flow around this is going just like that. So is this about the jet this way between the ridge and the actual upper level low right here? It probably would, but watch what happens. That's the thing is all these steering influences don't just remain in one spot. They're all moving features just like our actual tropical system. So our ridge actually kind of backs off. So our tropical system actually slingshots, get yanked in, but our low right here kind of pulls on this enough, mixed with the fact that we got the flow going like this, and our low is kind of yanking on this like this, that it's just kind of pulling this right into this area on the latest GFS. But this ridge is kind of backing off at the same time, so this is why on this specific run of the GFS, it doesn't really pull really far west, because the ridging on here is kind of weakening and getting kind of weakened by the tropical system, and it just kind of dwindles away. So I think regardless, land interaction will eventually weaken it anyways. It's not like we're still tracking it over water at this point. But between this upper trough right here and the flow around this ridge right here, this is going to yank this right into Florida. So I hope that makes sense. So let's talk about impacts now. It's the latest from the National Hurricane Center. This is predicted rain between now and the next 4 to 5 days. So if you live in the yellow, that's 4 to 6 inches of rain predicted. If you live in kind of that orange, yellow shaded color right here, along the actual panhandle and the bend of Florida, that is 6 to 8 inches of rain predicted. Check out the water getting pushed against the mountains of South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia. This will enhance rainfall. This is also frontal rain too, meaning a lot of this rain is going to be enhanced off rain from a cold front moving in. But we'll see what happens with that. But I mean, you got anywhere from 6 to 12 inches of rain forecast. There's a tight gradient between Charlotte, Columbia, and Augusta. Between, might as well say anywhere from 2 to 6 inches of rain forecast. The entire state of Georgia is going to get the potential for 3 to 6 inches of rain. So I don't think this is going to be a setup where we get 12 to 18 inches of rain because it's going to be moving so fast. But obviously, we'll get a lot of rainfall from it. As far as the excessive rainfall outlook, we do have a moderate risk for southern areas of Georgia, very small section of Alabama, and then obviously northern and the northern sections of Florida. The Panhandle and the Bend of Florida has a moderate risk, which means we have at least a 40% chance of flash flood guidance being exceeded within 25 miles in any given location in that red area. The yellow area is a 15% risk of that. And then we're talking about winds. This is the chance to see tropical storm force wind gusts, which is, might as well say 40 miles per hour or higher. The chances are already up to a 60, 70, even 80% chance along the Bend, Florida coastline and the Panhandle of Florida coastline here. I mean, we're already starting to get into Georgia. We're starting to get, 30, 40, 50% chance of tropical storm force wind gusts. I mean, this is starting to even get into South Carolina now. So it's game on, guys. I mean, it really is, and in the timeline to see tropical storm force wind gusts, you'll start to see it as early as Wednesday morning across the Florida Keys. By the time we get into Wednesday night, Tampa Bay, Orlando, I mean, we'll start to see it. By the time we're waking up Thursday morning, we're getting tropical storm force wind gusts all the way into North Florida. And by the time we get into Thursday PM, guys, I mean, this is all the way up into the Carolinas. So I will show you one model output of potential wind gusts, folks. I'm just going to show you the GFS because I feel like this is a good middle ground model run. But this is potential wind gust. Here it comes. It wants to bring 60 to 70 to 80 mile per hour wind gusts into the Tampa Bay area, the Clearwater, St. Petersburg. Of course, brings the core of the system right here into the Bend of Florida where we get, 80, 90, 100 mile per hour wind gusts. I think that the opportunity is there for it to be much stronger than that. But, what's wild to me, guys, and I'm not obviously discounting the impacts to Florida because this will obviously be where the most devastating impacts are, is what these winds do inland. Look at this on the GFS, the 70 to 80 mile per hour potential wind gust swath that goes right through eastern and southeastern Georgia. And check out South Carolina. It wants to bring, 60, 65 mile per hour wind gusts all the way into the Carolinas, guys. I mean, you go over and look at like North Carolina. I mean, check this out. Very strong winds all the way up into Charlotte, Columbia, Greenville, Spartanburg. So we're going to continue to try to figure this one out, guys. We'll have another update tomorrow night. I'm sorry, not tomorrow night, tomorrow morning. Let's see if we have a new update from the National Hurricane Center. We do not. So God bless all y'all. I'll continue to pump out the updates. And, I'll talk to you in the morning.